I'm going to kick off this review of a film by recommending another film. I'm going to recommend the film Good Boys, starring Jacob Tremblay. Uh, in many ways, this feels like it is almost like the spiritual sequel to it, although, as we frequently know all too well, sometimes sequels are not as good. Anyway, I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. This is Incoming. I don't know why it's incoming, but anyway. So it's a Netflix film. It actually may not have always been a Netflix film. It may have been something that lost distribution. I noticed that is done by Morgan Creek. Normally, Netflix has a really hard time partnering with production companies that make decent movies. And I even noticed that they were letting the credits play out. So it's possible that this was originally intended for theatrical release and it just didn't happen. This has audio description by Descriptive Video Works, and we'll talk about it. So what is Incoming? Incoming is an attempt to reclaim comedy, an attempt to reclaim teen comedy from the male perspective. But in order to do that, they have largely focused on the nerd kids, like the youngest possibly sounding kids they could find, which is why I recommended Good Boys, because it kind of feels like if we had made a direct sequel to Good Boys, which was about a young group of kids. Remember, they were foul-mouthed, it was R-rated, and everybody was like, oh my god, this movie is so shocking and hilarious. That's why I was like, yeah, so Good Boys pulled it off. This feels like it's almost like the spiritual sequel of them, like those boys getting ready to go into high school. That's why Incoming is here, because they're incoming freshmen. So I know it's a really weak link. But I don't know what else I would have called this film. We'd like to party. Please? Question mark. Our teacher's awesome. That would have made any sense until people were like, oh yeah, Bobby Cannavale is, I don't know what they're doing here, but this teacher is just, it's a joke. His teacher's not like really a fleshed out character. It's more just like a pun, like a joke, just a punchline. Just like, oh, let's just use him for that. So yeah, this group of friends, we start off with, there's some stuff I like right off the bat. You start off with like sort of like a regular teen situation where this boy is like practicing his moves on himself in a mirror. So, and then his sister walks in the room, coming in hot. She's sassy and bold and crass and all that kind of stuff that his older sister should be. And I was like, okay, well, so this is not, she's not some like ditzy airhead blonde, cheerleader thing from, so that's how we're merging sort of where we're headed with where we were and trying to bring the boys along with it this time. There was a film earlier this year called Prom Dates where I would argue the film went further but had female leads. So if you're interested in something that is a little bit raunchier than this, Prom Dates does it. It's on Hulu. I'm one of the few people who actually liked that film. I think people just don't really like, everybody's like pushing back against everything that's happening because it's different. And I thought Prom Dates did a better job than this. Anyway, so this has some promising moments to it. It has a couple moments where you feel like it could go wild, but it never really feels. One of the things that I noticed was, and I noticed this because of how I use audio description, and not a knock to Descriptive Video Works, but because I honestly don't think that there's anything here that they did wrong. A lot of these films always have a soundtrack that's really referential to like the current time period. And this felt like a very quiet film. I think it directly references like Project X in its little like plot summary, like Project X of 20. No, don't do that. Don't you dare. First of all, don't try to be like other things, you know? Try to be your own thing and then have other people then reference you. That's generally how things become popular, is that is your own uniqueness. Not, you don't become famous because you were like something else and then everybody was like, oh yeah, hey, remember that thing that was like that other thing that we liked really? you know um for example, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off has sort of stood the test of time, because before Ferris Bueller's Day Off there wasn't really a Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's just, and then there was. So any film that has seemed like that afterwards, nobody talks about those films. They just keep referencing Ferris Bueller's Day Off or The Breakfast Club, and then flash forward to, like a generation later, and they have stuff like Mean Girls, which feels very different, or Varsity Blues, and it's just like those films feel like they have their own thing to say. This doesn't really have anything to say. It just is. It just fell off of like a little formula train of teen comedy. Arguably, Prom Dates tries to say more than that, and Prom Dates is not going to go down in history either as being some like magical film. I don't know that this genre has had something really to say since Blockers. I know some people really like Booksmart, but I think maybe Blockers was the last film, and that is not really a teen comedy because it's mainly because it's the adults that are in it that kind of switch the perspective up by putting them in the same, in all those interesting positions. So I don't know. It has some sort of like familiar moments, like the nerds taking care of the really drunk girl in the car, and because I just watched 16 Candles for the first time not that long ago, it really reminded me of Anthony Michael Hall, and sort of like the doesn't age well thing where the girl's like passed out and he's like trying to like take photos with her to make it look like they hooked up, and we get into like the consent thing, and at least these boys aren't doing that. So but they're not doing it because of other things too, like the characters just played differently, like the whole interaction that girl has with the nerds that she's around. They do kind of split up, so it's not like all of them at the same time. Sometimes it's like two of them or one of them or whatever. But the interaction that she has with them is sort of limited. There's a character in here that is Dennis, who's just rightly obnoxious, but is looking to be, I guess, the stepdad to one of these kids, because he's dating the mom, and he's pretty like open about getting to bang the mom to the kid, and I'm just like, this guy's a dick. But the film doesn't really end with any sort of like gotcha for that guy. He feels like the kind of character that gets hit by a bus, and then and then you're like, no, that didn't happen. Shit. Well, that sucks. I mean, Bobby Cannavale plays a high school teacher who winds up at the party and then keeps partying with them. Like, he's like, oh yeah, well, I'm a teacher, so I have to teach you things. So somebody get me this and that, and then like combines things and shows them how to do things, like make a bong and do bong rips. And I'm just like, I mean, it's conceptually, I get why they did it, and Bobby commits to it, so it's sort of funny. And that's kind of what this film is. It's like sort of funny, but it also kind of feels like exactly what I said at the very beginning, which is Good Boys 2. Like, we're stretching the goodwill of the first film into a sequel, but we probably shouldn't, which they haven't done, thank God. There's just only one Good Boys. not everything needs a sequel. But it does kind of feel like that they were like, oh, well, what happens when these kids finally are ready to go into their freshman year? Let's do that movie. Let's throw them parties. No, please don't. I mean, there's so much here. I'm not gonna say it's bad. I didn't like hate myself for watching it. I just it was kind of like it's like empty calories, and it feels very much like 27 other teen movies I've seen already. I'm gonna forget it probably in I don't know, a year or two. I'll forget any specifics about it, and I'll be like, "What the hell is Incoming?" Oh yeah. Um, I would equate it to, and I think some people maybe have this from a little bit lower, but I remember the whole on set or whatever that thing was that they were doing about Nickelodeon, Quiet on Set. Reminded me that Drake Bell did a movie called College, which I saw, but then I was like, what happened in College? Drake Bell was in it. It's a raunchy comedy from, I want to say like 2008. Yeah. So that's what I think the future for Incoming is. I think I'll be like, so Bobby Cannavale was in that teen movie that one time. What was that movie about? Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It doesn't really even feel like it's aimed at teens because, like I said, those films always have like an obnoxiously loud soundtrack to them. Um, Even just go back and watch an American Pie movie, and like anytime that they have a chance to like blare a song at you for 2 seconds that's like hot off the radio, they do. And they're like, "'Cause we're in too deep and we're trying to keep all the fun in my head." And then they're like, well, we put that in there for 3 seconds. It feels very current. And then of course now it feels dated because you're like, wow, that song is old. But that's either in like one or two. I don't know. I've seen those movies way too many times. But this is really, it just kind of like, I don't know, it kind of even lacks that. It just, like, they couldn't get anybody to like, or they didn't have the budget to get like hot music. So yeah, audio description wise, uh, it's it's a really light narrator, very light job done here, and I don't have a problem with that. And I think the writing is fine. There wasn't a time where I was like, oh yeah. The only thing that I would say is this film is one of those things that is a little bit more deceptively harder to keep track of because there's a fuckload of kids that you just don't care about. There's just like a lot of kids in this film that you're just like, I don't know who you are and I don't know why I'm supposed to care. You know? Luckily they do a lot of talking, so you just kind of end up getting lost. But I didn't really. Sometimes I'm like, damn, I really wish I could know who was talking, but I didn't really want to know. My drive to know here was very, was very lackluster. I don't. It makes it sound like I really hate this film. I don't. I've seen much worse this year. And like I said, it's like an hour and a half, so I flew through this. And it's like, if you want to sit there and fly through this too, man, just do it. Like an hour and a half out of your life. It's sometimes I think we're like, there are films like this and we see them and we're just like, it's so derivative. It's just, and first of all, this was never made for critics. This was never made for critics. It was always made to entertain like a mass audience, specifically probably like a teen audience. I'm not a teen anymore. I do love teen comedies, so I'd like to think that I'm still very versed in this, even though that I'm aging away from it. I don't think this film covers that base though. I really truly feel like this is not the film that's reaching teens. I don't think teens on Netflix are like, oh my God, Incoming, you know? I don't think that's what they're doing. I also don't think they flock to Hulu for prom dates, so I don't know what they're watching, but they're definitely not watching this stuff anymore. And we should probably ask them what they're watching before we just assume and just continue to make films for adults who wish that there were still teen comedies like back in the day. Because I feel like that's what we're doing, is that we're trying to, but we can't, because we've sort of reformulated what that means, you know, informed consent and you don't want to come across as demeaning to females or just have I don't know. It's everything that is that they're having to think about in writing these scripts, instead of just writing a script that's funny, instead of writing a script that that says something that feels unique, that puts its foot down and says, "I'm here." I mean, those are the films that stand out, and then just deal with the rest after that. I mean, like, you can go, once you write that film, once you figure out what that film is, then you can go through and you can kind of trim it and be like, "Oh, we went too far with that joke," you know? But write it first and then pull it back. This one just kind of feels like the whole time somebody was writing it, they're like, "I don't know if we should do that. Oh God, we can't say that. Oh, we can't have that in there." And then you just kind of end up with almost like a PG-13 Euphoria, but it's not PG-13. It's very, I don't know what to do with this film. I didn't hate it. So in the grand scheme of 2024, this film's going to get probably a slightly higher grade than because of that. Because again, I don't want to say don't watch it, but at the same time, I don't want to prioritize your watching it. If you don't want to watch Incoming, by all means. But Netflix has had way worse films this year that have been originals. This film just feels like it didn't need to happen, but it did happen. At least it happened, and it's really short. At least it happened, and I wouldn't say necessarily any of the actors are bad. Bobby Cannavale really commits to his rather insane addition to the plot. I don't even know why he's in this. Like, it's so weird. It's like, Bobby, you just did Ezra and you were fantastic in that. What made you say yes to Incoming? Was it a paycheck? Was it like an insurmountable amount of money where you're just like, well, normally I make about $50,000 a movie, but they offered me $10 million to be an Incoming. I had to say yes. I don't know. Yeah. So kudos to Descriptive Video Works. Although I think it's mostly thankless audio description, because again, it's one of those weird things where it's like, there's a bunch of people in here that I just didn't care about. So I wasn't really like focused on following them. That's the thing. We create so much audio description for films that aren't great. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, how was it? I don't know. Were you able to follow the characters? I didn't really want to follow the characters. I didn't really care. So, yeah, that's Incoming. I think, like I said, I think the audio description, I wasn't sitting there the whole movie going like, fuck. But, yeah. So this is Incoming. I'll give it a C+. I'm gonna be nice and say that it swings slightly positive. It's just like, this is the same grade I gave Spaceman earlier this year, where I was like, yeah, there's a little bit here to like. Incoming has a couple jokes that land, but mostly it just kind of feels like, who did they make this for? And is that audience actually watching that? I'm deeply interested in that. Like, let's make podcasts about that. Like, somebody go make a podcast and find teenagers and be like, did you see Incoming? Have you seen Incoming? What did you think? Did you see it with friends? Did you see it by yourself? Did you watch it on your phone? Did you watch it on a TV screen? I so want to know the answers to these questions, because it feels like this film is just going to hit, like, just fall flat. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.